Okay, really good to see you again. Thank you for your patience with us during this July. This month has been extremely long, and it isn't just something we feel. It's actually true because it has somehow this July has 5 weeks. I don't know how that works, but it's something with climate change. I don't know. But it's been very long, but we're approaching the end. I wanted to just come back to, I think, we've met just the first day of the presidency. It feels like a very long time ago. The World Cup was still going on, but the weather was extremely warm, I remember. But we spoke about the world, the divisions of this world, how the Security Council becomes a mirror of those divisions, how generally the international humanitarian law is flagrantly violated in some of the conflicts that we're confronted with, Syria, Yemen, South Sudan, how that we are failing on preventing conflicts, and once conflicts break out, we have this huge difficulty in coming back and containing them, and how the military logic takes over, and how difficult it is for diplomatic and political solutions. And I think those are against that backdrop. I think we've tried to conceive a presidency month which would try to deal with some of these issues, to the best of our ability. The divisions and the working climate in the council has been bad. I mean, you've heard it, especially during the spring, I just want to when we think back of this month, there has really been really nice working environment, respectful treatment of each other in the council. Ambassadors are extremely friendly. And I must say, very constructive. Now, I don't, we can't take credit for this. Maybe it's the summer weather, but I do think this whole Back-Åkra, the retreat we did, and I want to say that, after we started the president with his breakfast, and I really made the point to our colleagues that, this is what we expect from them. I reminded them that you're not just there to represent your countries. We do have a bigger responsibility vis-à-vis the charter and vis-à-vis the people of the world who are looking to this council to make a difference on the ground, and we can't just sit there and have open squabbles and accusations against each other, because we're just deceiving everyone who still believes that maybe the council one day will make a difference. So now, based on this, so what have we done? Well, I think we created a better spirit. And we've also had this commitment to try to have results. There should be outcomes. And I think when we go through the list on basically every issue this month where we have set the goal that we should have, elements to the press afterwards, we have achieved it. There are one or two exceptions, but for the rest, we managed. So it's also thanks to the way I think we had been very clear. Coming into these meetings, we inform them, please focus on this issue. We're going to suggest that, let's unify around these points that I would like to make to the media afterwards, etc. And that has been a pretty successful, I think, constructive and result-oriented presidency. Secondly, we tried to always promote diplomacy. And the best way we can do that usually is to support the Secretary General's and his mediators' efforts. And if we go through the list of the issues we've discussed, Myanmar, Yemen, Syria, Cyprus, Libya, to mention 5, where there are UN mediation going on, we've been, with no exception, able to have the council rally around those mediators. And I think for most of them, it's helpful. They've been to the council, there's been close consultation, no one knows what's been discussed, but if they can appear with them, before, in front of the camera afterwards, and I can say that, you have our full support, the council members have all stood behind you in your efforts, I think it helps Martin Griffiths in Yemen, or Jane Hall-Lute in Cyprus, or Salameh in Libya. So that's been something we've strived for. And then, of course, you know, mission if he feels that the Security Council is behind him. So this has been very deliberate things we've tried to achieve. Thirdly, you know, in cases where we are unable to prevent conflict or where they're already, taking a horrendous toll, how can we protect the most vulnerable? And that explains why we have had this huge focus on children in armed conflict. You were there when our Prime Minister was here to lead the meeting. We took that and put it into a geographical context. You know, it's good that we take resolutions. It's good that we sort of push the norms on these things. But unless they are then translated into some action on the ground, it may have little meaning. So that's why when we discussed the Syrian humanitarian situation this month, we did it with a focus on the recently adopted Resolution 2427 on children in armed conflict, with Virginia Gamba and Mark Lowcock as briefers, focusing on how the children are faring in that terrible, terrible situation. Another two issues on the international humanitarian law aspects of things were the briefing we had with SRSG Pramila Patten on South Sudan, where in spite of efforts at finding a peace agreement there are horrendous situation when it comes to sexual exploitation and rape. And she gave a very, as she does, a very graphic description of what she had picked up during her recent trip there. So, and then, as you know, with the Netherlands in the lead, we were many who stood behind their organization of an area meeting on the ICC. ICC continues to be a controversial issue, unfortunately, inside the Security Council. But there are just so many cases where we would have preferred that the Council would have referred the issue to the ICC. But given the objection among permanent members, of course, we're not moving forward on that. So I think, you know, but still keeping it discussed is important. Fourthly, or fifthly, I forgot now, we're just trying to ensure that the Council responds in a better and more effective way to conflicts, including new and emerging threats. We've done the climate change and security debate. This was the first time since 2011 that the Council, you know, even touches this issue. So it's high time. The result of that is a chairman's summary that we've just finalized, and we're sending it around. And it reflects the fact that not everyone felt that discussion should be held in the Security Council, but it also, of course, builds on all the suggestions made on how we can improve our action. And so we are circulating that now, and I'll also bring it to the attention of the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General, because much of it is about the Secretariat and the UN's family coming better together in analyzing how the climate change issue affects security. The same, horizontal issues is about women, peace and security. You know how we've been really fighting hard for this issue since we came in a year and a half ago. It's really has advanced a lot, and I have to tell you, I'm heartened when I hear, Kazakhstan or Kuwait and speak about this on a regular basis, which we did not expect when we felt like a pretty lonely voice in January a year ago. Now it's like, I think it's an irreversible progress that, you see all the resolutions we're taking. There's very strong language on women, peace and security. And we're just trying to break this down now to look, how do we work with that on the ground in concrete situations? And this is the debate we had on Chad and Niger, following the Deputy Secretary General's and Margot Wallström's, my foreign minister's, joint trip there. So it's time that we break down the horizontal issues to more, look at how they are implemented on the ground. Man, I had this really brilliant set out here, but I'm losing my. I think I had a fifth point, and that was more about transparency and inclusivity. Yeah, we tried to include as many. This is about the input. Who feeds into the council, and then we've had plenty of civil society briefers. This is not automatic, I have to tell you. They're logistical, but also some political challenges. Sometimes we've had some very, I think, credible, loud, focused voices coming from civil society. We all remember the young woman from Chad who spoke on climate change, or the woman from DRC the other day. We've had the Colombian Prime Minister, Deputy President. We've had Minister from Iraq. We've had an interesting range of briefers, and we've had, I don't know whether this has happened before, but we've had more than half of them have been women. So this is, of course, very deliberate from our side, but 50% at least have been women briefers. So that's also about improving the way we do business. And finally, maybe a word on partnerships, because I think, and we've discussed it often with you, that the UN is very limited in its impact unless there is a credible regional organization at the other end. And the African Union is probably the most significant one, given how big the African issues are on the agenda. So this joint meeting we had with the AU Peace and Security Commission Council was extremely useful, we thought. And it was a step forward in terms of the working relationship between our two bodies. And the fact that we could adopt a joint communiqué afterward, being very clear on DRC, but also on South Sudan, were, in our mind, very significant, and we're happy that we also covered that flank, so to speak. So anyway, I think those are a little bit what we have done this month, and that I just want to show you that there were ideas and a philosophy behind how we have the issues we focused on and how we tried to deal with this. In the end, we had close to 54 hours of meetings. Sounds a lot. It's an entire week, more than a work week, that we've spent with each other in those council meetings. But actually, that is even a little below average, I think. I don't understand how we could meet more than that, but anyway, it seems to have happened in the past. Yeah, I think I'll just stop there. I'm sure I forgot some things I wanted to say, but I'm sure you have questions or comments or suggestions on how we can improve. So I guess I'll have to open the floor to hear those.
And the Oscar goes to... Ambassador, on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, thanks to your team. Thank you for the openness. Thank you for the transparency and the access. I think Sweden really sets a very high standard in terms of communicating with the press. Certainly we saw that after your first presidency, and everyone has bucked up since. The only thing they need to do now is take note of what you did at your end of presidency after party, and then all will be equal. Sherman Briceby, South African Broadcasting. A couple of questions, Ambassador. I don't know if you are aware of the 17 new allegations that the Secretariat announced in terms of sexual abuse and exploitation yesterday. Given that these numbers are not going away, we're seeing the tally tick up each and every quarter. Is there more that the Security Council could do in terms of SEA, despite the fact that the Secretariat and the SG has a zero-tolerance policy? And then on a question on preventative diplomacy. This is not on the Security Council agenda, but Zimbabweans have gone to the polls for the first time without Robert Mugabe on the ballot. There's a lot of tension now as they await results. Two candidates already, the top-tier candidates already claiming victory. What would your message be as the outgoing president of the council in terms of preventative diplomacy, given the fact that there have been very dubious elections in the past?
Can I ask you, because I had not seen these latest. Can you just say what were they? Were they about troops?
Some
were
troops.
Insider?
Michelle? Yeah.
We have. Repeating what the spokesman said yesterday, just reading. 43 allegations involving UN personnel, 18 peacekeeping, 25 from agencies, funds and programs, and then the remaining 27 were non-UN personnel, but working with implementing partners.
It's very sad to hear. I don't know. It used to be that in Sweden was the country with the highest number of suicides in the world, and I never quite understood that because I felt that most of my friends and were pretty happy people. But it turned out that we just had very rigid statistics. And follow up, and really went, we could really determine when there was a suicide, and it turns out that in many countries that was, sometimes not investigated enough, etc. So maybe the fact that we are now, I hope that part of these statistics are a fact that, there are more reporting coming in, that people feel more free to report allegations. I hope that's part of what we're seeing, because I think the Secretary General has been very serious about this issue, and we have respect for what he's trying to do inside the system. But I think the Council could probably do more to signal that there has to be zero tolerance on this. So I think maybe the statistics that you're just mentioning to me is a cause for us to come back to that issue also from the perspective of the Security Council. On the preventive diplomacy, Zimbabwe, you mentioned, I think there is this sometimes apprehension about prevention, right? We've tried in the past, also in the Peace-Building Commission, etc., to just, instead of discussing an individual country, be that in Africa or elsewhere, where there are elections coming up, is there risk here? Kenya, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, whatever. But more in order to sort of de-dramatize this, to just discuss, elections as a phenomena, or look at a region, and I think the Secretariat we should do more of that. But we also know that the Secretariat is under huge pressure when they suggest a topic for some of these situational awareness discussions, etc., by a country that may then feel stigmatized, or and there's a strong diplomatic effort by that country X to stop the Secretariat from bringing these things up. And of course, we're all doing that country and the people of that country a disfavor if we are not open enough about the risks that that comes with elections or whatever it is. We have a situation in Cameroon. We have a situation in Nicaragua. We have several situations out there that are complicated. People are dying. I'm not sure that the Security Council is the right body to deal with some of that. But I think we should be just more open and more frivolous about discussing if we are serious about protecting people, not leaders. We should then try to be a bit more open and de-dramatize prevention, I think. So I don't know. That's not the full response to that. But congratulations to the people of Zimbabwe. I mean, what I see, it's going well, and the turnout was great. And I heard stories about people having picnics, waiting for to vote, etc. I just think it's heartening for a country to Zimbabwe that finally is moving down that track.
Okay, Michelle and Pamela.
Thanks, Ambassador. There's a lot of speculation at the moment about what we might see in September at UNGA, what big meetings we might see. Are you aware of any plans for certain leaders to meet? Is Sweden involved in helping plan any meetings? Anything you can tell us?
Horizon has been the end of today. I didn't consider a life after this. I'm sure, UNGA, we had a conversation with the President of the General Assembly. He has these morning conversations. It's not called that. It's called something smarter than morning conversations. So, what? Morning dialogues. And I don't think we are supposed to disclose, what takes place there. But it was just a reflection that we had, or that my contribution to that was on peace and security. Do we in the General Assembly spend enough time on peace, given that the Council is not always the most effective body here? And the reflection I had was that, look what happened. Again, I come back to this about Ethiopia and Eritrea. Countries that we had sort of not given, we had given up on real efforts to resolve that situation. Has been there for 20 years. And shouldn't we then, when there is this very bold, historic leader coming in this case in Ethiopia, just changing the paradigm in favor of peace, shouldn't we just devote this General Assembly to give him the most prominent speaker's place, so that we can really reflect on, and other leaders can hear, why did he take that decision? What has it meant to his country, etc.? Because I think the example that he's setting is such. There's so many other countries that invest so much time in just defining why they need to be opposed to their neighbor. And if we could turn that energy instead into seeing, what if we would invest all that money, all that diplomacy, all that military build-up in looking at what a peaceful existence could look at, that would be a boost to the General Assembly, and that would really serve, I think, coming back to the ideals of the Charter. Sweden, unfortunately, we have elections in my country, so and that right around that time. So I think there won't be probably the most senior representation of my country this particular UNGA. So we'll have to just hope for Ethiopia.
Okay. Pamela and James.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Pamela from CBS. You mentioned the briefing with Secretary of State Pompeo and the ROK Foreign Minister Kang. Even though the Security Council has pretty much agreed to continue the sanctions on North Korea, there was a move for easing of sanctions by Russia and China, a few moves, a few proposals. In the discussions and now, is there any thought by Sweden that there should be some financial upside to North Korea in the days that come if there's a give and take back and forth with some positive moves by DPRK? And on that front, following up on Michelle, is there, as U.S. protecting power, are there any meetings you're scheduling and coordinating with for U.S. continuing dialogue? And is there any possibility that Kim Jong-un would come to the GA, as far as you know? You already said no, or that you're not focused on that. But there were some reports out of Japan that either Vladivostok or UNGA might be a place for a Japan-North Korea meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The DPRK issue is, it's in a way, we're just in such a better position now than we were 6 months ago. So but diplomacy is also volatile. It's fragile. There's been significant meetings taking place. There is actually a lot exciting stuff going on between North and South Korea in particular. There is, I believe, less progress on the general denuclearization effort that the United States is most involved in. So I just don't think it's time to rock the boat right now. I think what the Council has been doing has been successful in terms of promoting diplomacy. So I just think we need to stay the course right now and hope that there'll be constructive follow-up to the Singapore summit. And obviously that's what Secretary of State Pompeo is involved in. I don't think there's so much to report in terms of progress there, and therefore it's better to just stay where we are on that. Sweden does have a particular role because of the protective power and the fact that we haven't had an embassy there for a long time. I think there's some trust in Pyongyang about our intentions, but also that we are fully committed to implement sanctions and whatever else. So I think all of us with special relations and special diplomatic channels have a role to play right now, to pitch in, to offer our advice or reassure the sides that they need to stay the course. But I don't know. There's some ideas about a declaration of ending the war and sort of have a declaration of peace and then a peace agreement, etc. But all of that has to be part of a clearer path towards denuclearization. I think, apart from sanctions, I think the North Koreans have a lot to gain to just engage in this dialogue in a constructive way. Because then eventually sanctions would be gone, and there would be a possibility to interact more freely and openly with the rest of the world. And I'm sure there'll be South Korean and other regional powers ready to also support economically that process. I think that's what should be the main focus, rather than discussing whether sanctions should be partially lifted right now.
Thank you.
Ambassador, one of the most important jobs in the UN system should be appointed, we think, in the next few weeks, and that's the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Your country is a champion of human rights. How do you think Prince Zaid has done in the job? He's been very forthright. Is he a model for this job? What do you think should be the qualities of the new High Commissioner? And perhaps you could add your thoughts on, it's coming up to the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Are you worried that human rights are backsliding around the world?
I have the highest respect for Zaid. I think he's done a great job. I think what he has chosen to do is to, be very outspoken, as you say. I think that has attracted a lot of attention to the fact that the human rights situation in many parts of the world, in all parts of the world, is suffering right now. So I think at this day and age, that strategy has been a good one. Does that mean that we need a similar kind of very public, quite assertive and sometimes confrontational leader there? I don't know. I haven't thought about it. Sometimes, I also think that some sort of patient, more discreet conversation might be perhaps more useful, but it depends very much on what country we're talking about. So I don't know. It's up to the Secretary General, basically. There are some very good candidates out there. But generally, I agree with Zaid that the trend has been very, very negative in many parts of the world. I think, if we are, as you say, a champion of human rights, but we're also a bit cautious right now that we are cautious not to reopen some of the normative resolutions that are out there, because we fear that the general trend is such that, if we open it up, we might end up being forced to take a few steps back. I think that's very worrisome. So we need to reflect, and maybe the 70th anniversary is a good time to do that, on how we improve our action on human rights. You're right about that. I don't think the Council might not be always the best vehicle for it, but we are also looking at what's life for Sweden in the UN after the Security Council. Maybe this is an issue where we should work more on.
Thank you. My name is Masood Haider. I represent Daily Dawn newspaper of Pakistan. My question is about, also about human rights stuff. about Israeli-Palestinian question, which is your primary responsibilities for the international peace and security, and that is absolutely absent in that part of the world. And are there different sets of rules that apply to Israel or the different sets of rules that apply to other countries? Can you tell us whether in this dispute, this Israeli-Palestinian, whether there is any chance in the next 50 years, 100 years, or resolving itself the way it is set up, where the stranglehold of Israel is going on? Thank you.
Wow, that's a big question. I think the Israeli-Palestinian question is hugely disruptive. I mean, it's terrible for the suffering, especially from the Palestinian people, and not least in Gaza. I think it also spills over very negatively to other tensions in the region. So resolving it should be a priority. Has it been a priority? I'm afraid not. Everyone is waiting for a peace plan that no one really knows the details of, but it's already received with a certain amount of skepticism. The decision to move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem was not something we approved of. Actually, we were very openly critical of it, Sweden. So there's just been a lot of, I think, events that are actually moving us sometimes further away from peace than closer to peace. The recent legislation in Israel on the Jewishness of the state does not promote Palestinian participation in political life in Israel. And we're very close to another Gaza war. Almost on a daily basis, the tensions are there that could escalate very quickly. So it's a very, very dangerous situation. I don't think the Security Council has done enough about it. We've tried to, as I said before, try to at least look at when we, in the absence of a political solution that seems quite elusive, we should at least look at the humanitarian situation. And we're working very hard with the special coordinator, Mr. Mladenov, for efforts that would de-escalate the situation by improving the situation for the people in Gaza. And we've also taken some initiatives here, Sweden, during this month, so that we have made sure that every member on the Security Council understands exactly what life is in Gaza, by having the humanitarian coordinator brief all the council members.
Do you think there is any chance of any movement forward?
I don't see that in the foreseeable, in the months to come, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. There have been a lot of major serious divisions in the Security Council. All you have to do is look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Syria. How do you assess the future of the Security Council, which has come under tremendous criticism by some people because of its inability to actually carry out its mandate in terms of ensuring international peace and security? And having been on the council for now over a year and a half, have you seen any changes in terms of members being possibly more accommodating or more divisive?
Yeah, it's a bit too early for me to speculate about the future of the Security Council, but once we step off, I'm sure we're going to be quite open about the shortcomings in terms of working methods and, to my mind, the misuse of the veto, right? I'm very critical to the veto. But having said that, I mean, I also think that it's worthwhile for countries such as Sweden to be on the Council. Because I think it's our experience is that actually, if you are bold, if you are ready to take a few hits here and there, you can actually you can make space for common sense and to maybe change the dynamics here and there, even if it's marginally improve marginal improvements. I still think it's worthwhile given the importance of this body. Coming into July, we looked forward to some very difficult negotiations on some of the draft resolutions that we were needed to adopt on AMISOM, on Cyprus, on other issues. And in the end, people really played ball and toned down differences, and we ended up having consensus resolutions almost across the line, with one exception: the sanctions against South Sudan. I think every resolution was adopted consensually. So, and they are meaningful. I mean, much of the decisions here do mean things on the ground. So, I'm hopeful, but there's certainly room for improvements.
Thank you, Evelyn Leopold. In your speech in the Security Council on Syria, you mentioned first responders. I assume you were talking about the white helmets and the criticism they're getting. Who's criticizing them and why? And well, I know who is, but I'd like to hear you explain why and what you think of their activities, since they are every once in a while a candidate for the Nobel Prize. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know that Russia in particular has been the most vocal against the white helmets. I also think the Syrian representative, I don't remember exactly what he said about that, but they are also, of course, echoing what Russia is saying on this. Yeah, no, we found this time around, and we've done so in the past, that it's very important to come out in support of organizations and people who work, be it the UN or the White Helmets or other humanitarian organizations, especially in a situation such as the one in Syria, where there is a legitimate fight against terrorism. There is such a legitimacy, but there are very clear rules about the limitations of such, proportionality, protecting civilians, etc. They have been violated gravely in Syria. And that's why it's so important to remind the Syrian forces, not least now as they're involved again in a military offensive to retake, part of their country. And they say that it's a fight against terrorism, that there is just so many people who will suffer from that kind of disproportionate use of force. And there are so many fantastic people who are risking their lives on a daily basis under white helmets or other helmets or with no helmets, to protect people, and we need to speak up in favor of them. So that's where we come from on this, and they are also helpful in making sure that some of the humanitarian assistance is coming through. And as you know, Sweden and Kuwait has been the main protagonists of ensuring that there are, international law being respected when it comes to the humanitarian aspects of Syria. I'm afraid, we need to break. Oh, the spokesperson is getting angry with me. So, okay. It's up to your relations with the spokesperson. Maybe a very fast question. Yeah.
Carla Stay, Global Research. First, I'd like to thank you and your government for having expressed concern about the humanitarian suffering as a result of the Security Council sanctions against North Korea. According to the Washington Post this month, UN sanctions adopted last August removed parts of prior sanctions that attempted to avoid humanitarian consequences. And a number of humanitarian organizations have said because of the sanctions, it's impossible to work in North Korea. The North Korean government welcomes them. And most shocking, or one of the most shocking developments is that the Global Fund to fight AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis has cut funding to North Korea. And this is the global health community is horrified by this. They said it's a catastrophic betrayal. The question is, the UN sanctions, by cutting funding to tuberculosis, and this is known, resistant strains of tuberculosis, which are very difficult to treat, develop inevitably, and therefore denying medical treatment. The question is this a form of biological warfare to deny treatment to one illness?
my answer to that has to be that, look, there are sanctions. Sometimes they have collateral effects that are unintended. That's why we've been very insisting that everyone understands what those collateral effects are and that they be minimized, including that banks and other credit holders should still work with the humanitarian agencies in North Korea so as to ensure that all of this aid can come through. Now, what an individual body or agency or program does, which I didn't know about, is not under our control. So if one agency decides to stop working in North Korea because the conditions are difficult there, it's their decision. It's not something that I would condone. But that has to be my comment on that question. And I think in a way you're putting the question to the wrong country because we've been really standing up for that there should be minimized effects. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you, Egon, again. All right. Enjoy the rest of the day and hope you get some vacation too.